Woo! Within the sacred floating pagoda, the yellow wind howled, continuously blowing towards the thick sea of corpse chi below. In the depths of this sea, Shi Tianyou's expression was heavy, as if facing a great enemy. Hiss! Hiss! The yellow spirit disintegration wind finally touched the sea of corpse chi. At the moment of contact, the thick corpse chi rapidly began to dissipate at an astonishing speed. It was like snow meeting lava. Mu Chen's eyes brightened at this scene. The spirit disintegration wind not only disintegrated spiritual energy but also had the same effect on corpse chi. During their earlier confrontation, Mu Chen had already experienced the troublesome nature of corpse chi. It was corrosive and could devour life force. If not for his spiritual energy being enhanced by the sacred floating pagoda, which also contained sealing power, he would have suffered greatly from it. Now, the corpse chi around Shi Tianyou was being broken down at an alarming rate by the spirit disintegration wind. Under the protection of the corpse chi sea, Shi Tianyou's expression grew darker. This strange spirit disintegration wind had clearly caught him off guard. Hiss! The yellow wind continued to howl, and under the disintegration of the spirit disintegration wind, the thick sea of corpse chi around Shi Tianyou began to dissipate visibly. No matter how hard Shi Tianyou tried to replenish the corpse chi, he could not stop its disintegration. In just a few minutes, the corpse chi surrounding Shi Tianyou had almost completely vanished, revealing his true form. Go! Mu Chen's eyes flashed coldly. He pointed, and the spirit disintegration wind surged forward, having already consumed Shi Tianyou's defense. Now, it was time to deliver a devastating blow to his body. The yellow wind wrapped around Shi Tianyou's body, causing the black robe covering him to tear apart, exposing his pale and withered body. His form was like a skeleton, yet it gleamed with black light, as tough as fine iron. But this was no problem for the spirit disintegration wind. A gust of yellow wind swept across Shi Tianyou's body, instantly tearing his pale skin. The flesh began to yellow, showing signs of turning into sand. Shi Tianyou fled in a panic, but the spirit disintegration wind was like a shadow, following him relentlessly. In the pursuit, after a few minutes, Shi Tianyou's condition had become increasingly desperate. His body was covered in numerous wounds, and the corpse chi surrounding him had thinned considerably. Faced with this unstoppable spirit disintegration wind, Shi Tianyou was clearly helpless. Damn bastard! Shi Tianyou roared. If it were a direct confrontation, he would have no fear of Mu Chen, but these strange yellow winds were making him feel extremely frustrated. This can't go on. Shi Tianyou growled internally. If he continued to be worn down by Mu Chen's spirit disintegration wind, it wouldn't be long before his own corpse chi was completely depleted. At that point, he would truly become a sitting duck, at the mercy of his enemy. Shi Tianyou's eyes flickered wildly. In the next moment, he gritted his teeth as if making a decision. His hands quickly formed a seal, and in an instant, a dense wave of corpse chi surged from his pores, transforming into a corpse cocoon that wrapped him tightly. Lifebound corpse escape. The corpse cocoon enveloped Shi Tianyou's body, and faint, eerie whispers could be heard from within. The spirit disintegration wind howled as it swiftly eroded and dissolved the corpse cocoon. But as the cocoon opened, a withered bone appeared, and Shi Tianyou's form vanished into thin air. Mu Chen's gaze tightened as he sensed the change. His expression shifted slightly. He actually escaped the sacred floating pagoda? Through his perception, Mu Chen could sense the corpse chi fluctuations appearing outside the sacred floating pagoda. Is it some kind of death substitution art? How strange. Mu Chen's expression became more serious. Shi Tianyou's technique was remarkable. It allowed the withered bones to temporarily take his place in death, while his true body remained unharmed and escaped. This technique, while shocking to Mu Chen, also made him feel a bit relieved. If Shi Tianyou had used this trick at the most critical moment, it would have been enough to deceive him completely, enabling a sudden fatal attack that could turn the tide. This method must have significant limitations. Shi Tianyou probably won't be able to use it again anytime soon. Mu Chen pondered for a moment before raising his head to gaze at the howling spirit disintegration wind within the sacred floating pagoda. Unable to help himself, he smiled. In fact, it was Shi Tianyou who had become so overwhelmed by the spirit disintegration wind that he was now in a pitiful state, trembling in fear. If he had observed more carefully, he would have noticed that although the wind was powerful, it was a wind without roots, bound to dissipate eventually. As time passed, the spirit disintegration wind was indeed growing weaker and thinner. Fortunately, Mu Chen had already achieved his goal. With a flick of his sleeve, the sacred floating pagoda rapidly shrank and transformed into a beam of light that shot into his eye. While his figure once again appeared on the altar, a mischievous glint in his eyes as he looked toward Shi Tianyou, who was still struggling in front of him. At this point, Shi Tianyou was still in a miserable state. His pale body was riddled with holes, and his bloodless flesh squirmed, quickly repairing the damage. Around the altar, those who had been closely watching the battle couldn't help but feel a tremor at the sight. They clearly hadn't expected that after just a brief time inside the pagoda, Shi Tianyou would come out in such a battered condition. What methods had Mu Chen used in the pagoda to injure Shi Tianyou so badly? Many powerful figures exchanged looks, confusion flashing through their minds, and a growing sense of awe toward Mu Chen's unfathomable strength. Meanwhile, Moxin and Xian Luo, who were in the midst of their own fierce battle, were similarly startled, a sense of deep apprehension toward Mu Chen's mysterious methods growing in their hearts. Shi Tianyou's pale, bloodless flesh continued to writhe, and his gaze toward Mu Chen became increasingly terrifying. He was like a wounded wolf, plotting revenge. I never thought Shi Tianyou, would be reduced to such a pathetic state. His voice, cold and filled with killing intent, seemed to come from the depths of an abyss, thick enough to freeze one's very soul. Seeing the murderous glint in Shi Tianyou's eyes, Mu Chen's own eyes narrowed, his body growing taut. At this moment, Shi Tianyou resembled a beast on the brink of madness. Suddenly, Shi Tianyou's pupils began to gather a pale light. Within a few breaths, his eyes turned completely white, devoid of pupils. His white pupils, like those of a death god, exuded an aura of death so intense that it seemed capable of freezing one's heart. As Mu Chen stared at those white eyes, a surge of spiritual energy erupted within him. Behind him, a massive purple-golden figure materialized, clearly the immortal golden body being activated. The overwhelming sense of danger from Shi Tianyou's eyes made Mu Chen react almost instinctively, unleashing his most powerful defense. Shi Tianyou's body slowly rose, and to everyone's shock, he suddenly kneeled in midair. His already pale and withered form began to wither even further, as though all the vitality within him was being drained. A faint stream of pale air seeped from his flesh, eventually merging with the corpse chi around him. It continuously condensed behind him, and soon, a giant shadow about 1,000 feet tall appeared. This shadow was blurry, wearing a black crown, holding a white scythe, and surrounded by a vast aura of death. In that instant, it seemed as though the very death god had descended. The air was thick with an endless aura of death, and the terrifying energy caused every battle around the altar to come to a halt. All eyes turned to the monstrous presence, their faces filled with dread. What is that? Moxin and Xian Luo both stared at the giant shadow, their eyes wide with shock, sensing an overwhelming sense of danger emanating from it. The Flame Demon Commander and the Blade Demon Clan experts were equally startled, their faces flashing with fear. They exchanged looks and muttered in awe. Shi Tianyou has actually mastered the corpse god technique of the clan of corpse demons? They then turned their gaze back to Mu Chen, their shock deepening. To force Shi Tianyou to this point, Mu Chen was indeed an unimaginable force. The Flame Demon Commander in particular was thankful. He recalled his previous encounter with Mu Chen, and had the latter truly unleashed his full power, he wouldn't have had any confidence in escaping alive. After all, even someone as powerful as Shi Tianyou had been pushed to use such a move. One could only imagine how difficult and troublesome Mu Chen must be. As the vast sky of vision trembled, Mu Chen's gaze locked onto the giant shadow behind Shi Tianyou. His pupils suddenly contracted, sensing an overwhelming danger that caused his heart to race. Taking a deep breath, his thoughts stirred, and dozens of immortal divine runes quickly gathered, forming into a massive spear, which shot toward Shi Tianyou with immense force. This fellow cannot be allowed to continue. Boom. However, when the giant spear was still several dozen meters away from Shi Tianyou, it shattered instantly, turning into dust and vanishing into the air. Shi Tianyou completely ignored Mu Chen's disturbance. His pale eyes emotionlessly fixed on Mu Chen. Then, his body slowly knelt before Mu Chen from afar. At the same time, the giant shadow behind him also bent down and knelt toward Mu Chen. Shi Tianyou's cold, murderous voice, filled with boundless killing intent, resonated like the Grim Reaper calling souls, echoing throughout the world. 3 bows to the corpse god. 3 bows to the corpse god. When Shi Tianyou's hoarse voice echoed through the heavens and earth, the entire world seemed to dim, and the wails of death spread across the sky, causing hearts to tremble with unease. Mu Chen's expression turned grave at this moment, a deep sense of dread surging within him. From this strike of Shi Tianyou's, even he could feel the presence of death. If he didn't respond properly, it was likely that today, even he would perish here. The extraterritorial evil clan, indeed mysterious and unpredictable. Mu Chen took a deep breath, then quickly formed a seal with his hands. Suddenly, the enormous body of the immortal golden body glowed with purple golden light. Ancient divine runes rapidly condensed and appeared. These runes detached from the immortal golden body, swirling around it like purple golden divine dragons, emitting an undying power. All eyes in the world were now focused on the altar, understanding that the clash there could determine the outcome of the entire battle. Shi Tianyou's pale eyes, full of evil and malice, fixed on Mu Chen. A cruel smile twisted at the corner of his mouth. His body leaned forward, and he knelt before Mu Chen. 3 bows to the corpse god. The first bow takes life. As Shi Tianyou bowed his head, the giant shadow behind him, resembling a corpse god, also bowed to Mu Chen. At that moment, when its head lowered, an indescribable aura of death erupted like a storm. Wherever the death aura passed, any trace of life was violently stripped away. Even the sky and earth seemed to turn dull and lifeless, as if falling into a state of death. In this world, whether it was a powerful figure from the Great Thousand Worlds or one from the extraterritorial evil clan, they all began to retreat. The death aura that spread terrified them, their eyes filled with panic. Some who were slower to retreat were soon swept by the death aura, their bodies instantly withering into skeletons without even a scream. Qing Shuang and Qing Ling quickly retreated, glancing at each other, their beautiful eyes filled with shock. They had never imagined that Shi Tianyou's attack could be so terrifying. Such methods were undoubtedly on par with the truly peerless divine abilities from the Great Thousand Worlds. Their gazes shifted toward Mu Chen's direction, a trace of worry flashing in their eyes. Even though they were only lightly affected by the death aura, they were in such a fragile state. Mu Chen, being at the center of it, would undoubtedly face an unimaginable amount of pressure. Mu Chen, you have to hold on. At this moment, all they could do was silently pray. As countless powerful figures in the heavens and earth retreated, the death aura howled, swiftly descending upon Mu Chen. Under its enveloping presence, his skin began to turn pale at a visible rate. His flesh withered, and the vitality within his body rapidly faded. No matter how he tried to channel spiritual energy to protect himself, it seemed useless against the encroaching death aura. Mu Chen's expression became extremely solemn. At this rate, in just a few minutes, his body would wither away completely, his life drained, and he would become a mere skeleton. Shi Tianyou's attack was truly tyrannical and bizarre to an extreme. Phew. In a critical moment, Mu Chen took a deep breath. His eyes gleamed with spiritual light, and he suddenly let out a powerful roar towards the sky. At that instant, his immortal golden body beneath him erupted with a dazzling beam of purple gold light. You have corpse god life seizing, but I have immortal protection. The immortal divine runes hovering around him whizzed through the air, surrounding Mu Chen from all sides. From a distance, it appeared as if a purple gold cocoon of light had formed around him, fiercely protecting him within. Immortal power. No matter if heaven and earth are destroyed, I remain undying and unbreakable. Immortal vitality, how can it be stolen? The gray white aura of death surged toward the purple gold cocoon, but the immortal light remained unyielding, as steadfast as a boulder. He actually blocked it. From a distance, the Flame Demon Commander and other experts from the extraterritorial evil clan were stunned. They knew full well just how tyrannical Shi Tianyou's technique was. Any being weaker than a demon emperor would inevitably have their vitality drained and become a lifeless corpse once they were subjected to the corpse god's bow. Even they, facing such an attack, would be doomed. Yet now, Mu Chen had actually withstood this death blow, and this was something they could hardly believe. As they changed expression, Shi Tianyou's pupils also constricted. Clearly, the result was beyond his expectations. He had initially thought that this bout would be enough to end the battle. But Mu Chen's tenacity exceeded his imagination. You troublesome brat, but today, you must die. Cold light gathered in Shi Tianyou's eyes. In the next moment, his body shriveled further, and even his hair began to turn pale. His vitality surged into the towering figure behind him, a massive shadow exuding terrifying corpse aura. Second bout of Devour Divinity. Shi Tianyou's gaze grew colder as he raised his head once again, then lowered it to bow before Mu Chen. The massive corpse aura figure also bent its head. In that instant, a beam of gray light, about 10 feet in length, suddenly shot out from the figure's eyes. The gray light pierced through space and appeared right in front of Mu Chen. Already on full alert, Mu Chen let out a loud roar. Immortal divine runes exploded around him, merging together to form layers of defense, blocking the oncoming gray light. The gray light seemed weaker than before, but the aura of death it carried was far stronger. Mu Chen had no doubt that if the gray light touched him even slightly, he would instantly perish. Sizzle! However, as soon as the immortal divine runes came into contact with the gray light, they were shattered with crushing force, and the seemingly formidable defense was instantly obliterated. Mu Chen's figure was forced back. At the same time, more immortal divine runes erupted from his immortal golden body, rushing toward the gray light in waves, attempting to wear it down. But despite Mu Chen's frantic defense, the gray light showed no sign of slowing down. Blazing Sovereign Array. The spiritual formation, long prepared, was activated again. A gigantic shadow of the blazing sovereign appeared. But as its massive fist barely touched the gray light, it let out a mournful cry and collapsed instantly. The powerful beings from the great thousand worlds around the altar saw that no matter what Mu Chen did, he couldn't stop the gray light. Their expressions all changed, their scalps tingling with fear. Mu Chen, Qing Shuang and Qing Ling clenched their jade-like hands, their faces turning pale. Retreat! 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 Mu Chen's body retreated rapidly, but the gray light followed him closely, growing faster and faster. The pressure of death weighed heavily on him, and his body felt a chill as though he were being suffocated by the aura of death. There was no more room to retreat. Mu Chen's eyes flickered wildly, and in the next moment, he suddenly roared to the sky, sacred floating pagoda. A burst of holy light erupted from his eyes, and a crystalline floating pagoda shot forth. Poof! Mu Chen bit his tongue and spat out several mouthfuls of blood, immediately spraying them onto the floating pagoda. With every drop of blood, a pale hue appeared on his handsome face, clearly showing the toll it was taking on his vitality. But at this moment, he cared not for the cost. He sensed that the gray light contained a bizarre power capable of instantly erasing consciousness. Once it touched him, his mind would be wiped, and though his body might remain intact, he would become like a puppet, a mere shell of himself. And the sacred floating pagoda had the power to seal and suppress gods. It was his only hope. Mu Chen's essence blood sprayed onto the sacred floating pagoda, instantly unleashing boundless radiance that soared into the sky. A divine aura surged upwards, and then the sacred floating pagoda shot forward, colliding with the oncoming gray light. Clang! The impact produced a sharp, clear sound, but this time, the seemingly unstoppable gray light was finally halted. Amid the crisp collision, the gray light trembled and then shattered. The sacred floating pagoda, as if severely injured, was sent flying back and directly into Mu Chen's eyes. Blood began to flow from the corner of his eyes, giving an eerie appearance. He blocked it again. Around the altar, the flame demon commander and the others swallowed nervously, their gazes towards Mu Chen now tinged with fear. The corpse god's three bows, the first, to seize vitality, the second, to devour divinity. It was said that no one beneath the demon emperor's power had ever survived these two bows, at least, they had never heard of it. But now, it was happening right before their eyes. On the altar, Mu Chen slowly wiped away the blood flowing from the corner of his eyes. His face was unusually solemn. He had experienced many battles between life and death over the years, but never had he felt so close to death as he did now. The corpse god's three bows were simply too strange and powerful. This is absolutely comparable to a true supreme divine ability in the great thousand worlds. Mu Chen took a deep breath. Although he possessed one of the 36 supreme divine abilities, once she transforms three purities, he had already used it against the demon emperor's corpse and could not rely on it for much help now. In the distance, Shi Tianyou's pale eyes fixed on Mu Chen. His face twitched violently as he rasped, "Since I perfected this corpse god technique, no one has ever survived these two bows. Now there is." Mu Chen spat out a mouthful of blood. Shi Tianyou looked at him deeply, his body already withered like a skeleton. However, his pale eyes only grew more eerie. "Therefore, to show respect for you as my opponent, I will let you die to my third corpse god bow." As Shi Tianyou's cold voice echoed, many powerful figures in the great thousand worlds felt a jolt in their hearts. After Mu Chen barely managed to withstand the previous two bows with all his strength, how could he block the terrifying third bow? If Mu Chen failed, who among them would have the power to stop Shi Tianyou from destroying the altar? Even Moxin and Xin Luo, having witnessed Shi Tianyou's two bows, fell silent. However, Shi Tianyou paid no attention to their thoughts. His gaze remained fixed on Mu Chen, and then all the flesh and blood on his body melted away, transforming into vitality that flowed into the massive corpse god figure behind him. At this moment, Shi Tianyou appeared as nothing more than a corpse. He glanced at Mu Chen from afar, then closed his eyes, bowed his head, and offered the third bow. His cold voice echoed through the heavens and earth, sending chills down one's spine. Corpse god's three bows, world annihilation. Corpse god's three bows, World annihilation. As Shi Tianyou's cold, sinister voice resounded, the entire world seemed to freeze. The howling winds ceased, the flow of spiritual energy came to a halt, and all sounds faded into oblivion. Behind Shi Tianyou, the massive deathly figure bowed its head. The moment its head lowered, the vast space 10,000 miles ahead shattered, and countless fragments of space rained down like a torrential storm. The ground below split into countless endless cracks, spreading out like an abyss in all directions. All the strong cultivators were fleeing frantically from the area, their faces filled with uncontrollable terror. They couldn't fathom the sheer power of Shi Tianyou's third bow. Qing Shuang and Qing Ling were also among those fleeing. Their pale faces gazed at the isolated altar in the distance. On that altar, Mu Chen's figure seemed extraordinarily fragile at this moment. While everyone else fled in panic, Mu Chen remained steadfast, standing like a rock, unaffected by the impending wave of destruction, no matter how terrifying it was. They really wanted to help Mu Chen, but they knew their own strength was simply not enough to intervene in the battle at hand. Not only were they powerless, even Moxin and Xian Luo, both of whom were top tier in the Great Perfection stage, dared not get involved. The battle between Mu Chen and Shi Tianyou had reached the limits below the Heavenly Supreme level. Even though Moxin and Xian Luo had reached the peak of Great Perfection and had even cultivated a near-peerless divine ability, that ability still couldn't compare to the corpse god's 3 bows of Shi Tianyou. The gap was too vast. To contend with Shi Tianyou's 3 bows, one could only wield a true peerless divine ability. However, true peerless divine abilities were only within the reach of the Heavenly Supreme. Even with their extraordinary talent, they still had no means to cultivate such an ability. As they quickly retreated from the battlefield, Missouri Xin and Xian Luo exchanged a distant glance. In their eyes, there was a flash of deep caution and murderous intent. They had vastly underestimated Mu Chen's hidden strength. Initially, they thought it would be a simple matter to capture him, but based on the combat power Mu Chen displayed now, it seemed they had been too naive. But this guy is definitely dead this time, and Shi Tianyou, to perform the corpse god's 3 bows, must have paid a tremendous price. At that point, we can move in and take them all down. Their eyes flickered as, without a word, they silently reached an understanding. Clearly, after witnessing Mu Chen's strength, they no longer had the confidence to deal with him alone. It was safer to join forces. As the powerful experts from both sides retreated like a tide from the altar area, Mu Chen found himself under immense pressure. The world around him was dim, as if it had been consumed by death. Even the spiritual energy in the air had become stagnant. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't draw any from it. This collapsing space, the gray sky, the stillness of spiritual energy, it truly felt like the end of the world. As Mu Chen's expression grew solemn, black winds swept through the sky, bringing with them a foul, decaying stench, a scent akin to rotting corpses. The black corpse wind extinguished all life in its path. Before it, it felt as though all living beings would be eradicated. Mu Chen stood atop his immortal golden body, watching the black corpse wind howling toward him. He could feel the annihilation energy within it, and his hand slowly clenched into a fist, the veins on his arm pulsing. Even he had to admit that Shi Tianyou's 3rd bow was incredibly powerful, so powerful it sent a chill of fear through him. He had no doubt that if he made even the slightest mistake, he would fall to Shi Tianyou's hands today. Since I've reached the end of the road, then the only option is to fight with everything I have. Mu Chen took a deep breath. Facing this dire situation, his expression gradually grew calm, and even his eyes slightly closed. He spread his hands wide, and the immortal golden body beneath him erupted with billions of purple golden rays. Each ray seemed to carry the essence of immortality. The black corpse wind roared, covering the sky and blocking out the sun. In the midst of this dim world, only the giant purple golden figure remained, standing motionless like a mountain. And just as the black corpse wind was about to envelop him, a soft whisper escaped Mu Chen's lips. Immortal divine ability, immortal golden lotus. Buzz. Billions of purple golden beams exploded, and within the light, an enormous purple golden lotus began to slowly take shape. The petals of the lotus were inscribed with ancient runes, each one seeming to have been created by the heavens themselves, imbued with the rhythm of the great Tao. The purple golden lotus rotated, and its petals quickly began to close. When the black corpse wind descended, the massive lotus bud enveloped the immortal golden body. SSSHH. In the next instant, the black corpse wind filled with annihilation energy submerged the lotus bud. The entire world was plunged into darkness. Far away, The retreating experts from both sides stopped at the edge of the dark world. They looked on in horror at the abyss, where there was not a trace of life left. Gulp. Many powerful beings from the great thousand worlds swallowed nervously, their faces pale and filled with despair. Faced with the overwhelming power of Shi Tianyou, they had no courage left to fight. That guy finally died. The Flame Demon Commander and the powerful warrior from the Blade Demon Clan wiped the cold sweat from their brows, their voices trembling with a hint of fear. No one had expected that a mere Upper Earth Supreme would prove to be such a formidable opponent. Even Shi Tianyou, in his desperate moments, had been forced to use the corpse god's third bow. However, when Shi Tianyou performed the third bow, they all knew that Mu Chen's death was certain. No one could survive the corpse god's third bow. Qing Shuang. What happened to Mu Chen? Among the many powerful beings from the great thousand worlds, Qing Ling couldn't help but grasp Qing Shuang's jade-like hand tightly, her voice filled with anxiety. Qing Shuang silently shook her head, but the dim sadness in her beautiful eyes clearly reflected her own deep unease. Facing the near-world-destroying power of Shi Tianyou's third bow, even she could not believe that Mu Chen could survive. "Prepare to withdraw," Qing Shuang whispered. "If Mu Chen falls, we'll lose all our chances. We must leave the 4 sacred pagodas as quickly as possible and use the protective charms given by the clan's elders to escape the ancient sacred abyss." Upon hearing this, Qing Ling's face turned pale. Just as the morale of the powerful beings from the great thousand worlds sank, someone suddenly exclaimed, "There's golden light over there." Swish. Everyone's gaze snapped upward, staring in disbelief at the dark world. To their astonishment, deep within the darkness, a streak of purple golden light began to form. The purple golden light grew stronger, and moments later, the golden glow surged, revealing a quiet, unopened purple golden lotus bud standing tall in the dark world. Though the lotus bud was covered with mottled marks, there was no sign of it breaking apart. Buzz! Endless purple golden light erupted from the lotus bud, and the golden light swept out, banishing the dark world. The lotus bud slowly began to bloom, and a massive purple golden figure reappeared before everyone's eyes. On the shoulder of this massive figure stood a slender and tall figure, hands clasped behind his back. That's Mu Chen. The many powerful beings from the great thousand worlds stared, wide-eyed, in disbelief. The Flame Demon Commander, the warrior from the Blade Demon Clan, and the other experts from the extraterritorial evil clan were equally horrified, murmuring, "Impossible. Impossible." Moxin and Xian Luo were also stunned. Impossible. Even Shi Tianyou, whose body was like a skeleton on the altar, froze in place, as if his very thoughts had ceased. Standing on the shoulder of the immortal golden body, Mu Chen slowly opened his closed eyes. He looked out at the world filled with golden light, his tense body gradually relaxing. Immortal Golden Lotus, the most powerful protective technique of the immortal golden body. Mu Chen lowered his head, gazing at the immortal golden body. He hadn't expected the second supreme divine ability of the immortal golden body to possess such immense protective power. With a sigh in his heart, Mu Chen raised his head and fixed his gaze on the stunned Shi Tianyou on the altar. Boom. At that moment, the giant shadow of the corpse god behind Shi Tianyou seemed to dissipate, as if its energy had been completely drained, and it shattered. Pfft. A spurt of dark blood poured from Shi Tianyou's mouth. The blood was pitch black, thick with deathly aura. At this moment, Shi Tianyou had no vitality left. He was clearly on the verge of death. That was the price he paid for using the corpse god's 3 bows earlier. "You lost," Mu Chen said calmly, his eyes locked on Shi Tianyou. At this point, Shi Tianyou had clearly lost all his fighting strength. As Mu Chen's voice reached his ears, Shi Tianyou's dazed eyes gradually began to regain focus. He glared at Mu Chen and then gritted his teeth, letting out a sinister smile. "You think you've won? Dream on. Demon Emperor's corpse, explode for me." He roared, and at that moment, a black light shot out from a distant spot, breaking free from the ocean of battle intent. It sped toward the altar and exploded with endless demonic light, causing a massive eruption. Mu Chen, far away, saw this and his pupils contracted. This madman actually self-destructed the Demon Emperor's corpse. What is he trying to do? Boom. The body of the Demon Emperor's corpse suddenly exploded, and in an instant, a terrifying demonic aura surged wildly, resembling dark clouds stretching for miles, enveloping the sky above the altar. This scene caused countless shocked exclamations, as everyone stared in disbelief at Shi Tianyou's figure. No one had expected that he would forcefully detonate a Demon Emperor's corpse like this. Even the experts from the extraterritorial evil clan, such as the Flame Demon Commander, were dumbfounded. As members of the extraterritorial evil clan, they knew better than anyone the value of a demon emperor's corpse. Especially for the clan of corpse demons, the value of the demon emperor's corpse was immeasurable. This guy is truly insane. Moxian, Xian Luo, and the others exchanged glances, their eyes flashing with eagerness. They had previously feared Shi Tianyou's demon emperor's corpse, but now that he had been heavily injured and the corpse had self-destructed, it was clear that Shi Tianyou's threat had been reduced to the lowest point. However, compared to the excitement of the many experts from the Great Thousand Worlds, Chen, who stood above the altar, looked more solemn. He gazed at the thick demonic cloud spreading above, feeling an uneasy presence in his heart. Shi Tianyou should be fully aware of the value of the demon emperor's corpse, but he still chose to detonate it without hesitation. This meant that he must have believed that destroying the demon emperor's corpse would bring him greater benefits. At this moment, what could possibly be more valuable than the demon emperor's corpse? Chen's gaze instinctively shifted to the center of the altar, where a black stone coffin was sealed beneath several stone tablets. Inside, there was a remnant soul of the heavenly demon emperor. Heh, you noticed, didn't you? Seeing Chen's gaze, Shi Tianyou smiled coldly and then quickly formed a seal with one hand. Immediately, the vast demonic cloud above began to swirl, and after a brief moment, 10 or so droplets of black liquid, each about the size of a fingertip, fell from the sky and landed directly on the black stone coffin. Is that Demon Emperor Essence blood? Upon seeing the black liquid, Chen's unease surged to its peak. From the liquid, he sensed a violent, heart-racing fluctuation. That was the Demon Emperor's essence blood. Earlier, when Shi Tianyou detonated the Demon Emperor's corpse, this was the result, the gathering of all its power into these few drops of essence blood. Sizzle! Sizzle! As the Demon Emperor essence blood landed on the black stone coffin, Chen immediately saw that the blood quickly fused into the coffin. In the next moment, the coffin trembled, and a thick, nearly tangible demonic aura surged out from within. The ancient chains wrapped around the coffin rapidly corroded under the invasion of the demonic aura, quickly developing numerous cracks. Bad. The coffin is about to break its seal. Chen's expression changed dramatically as he saw this scene. At the same time, the experts from the Great Thousand Worlds also noticed something was wrong. When they realized what was happening with the coffin, their faces immediately turned pale, and intense fear filled their eyes. Clearly, they had not expected that after just eliminating the threat Shi Tianyou had posed, a far greater trouble was about to emerge. Once the heavenly demon emperor's remnant soul breaks free of its seal, the power it holds will far exceed anything they, the great perfection-level experts, could contend with. Buzz! Buzz! As the many experts looked on in fear, the 4 stone tablets atop the altar seemed to sense the disturbance caused by the heavenly demon emperor's remnant soul. They erupted with waves of vast light, descending and gradually suppressing the coffin's violent tremors. Seeing this, the onlookers couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Boom. However, just as they were beginning to relax, one of the stone tablets suddenly exploded into pieces, and a burst of light condensed above it, faintly forming an image. It showed another altar, but this time, a massive, giant-like demonic figure stood in the center, roaring to the heavens. In his hand, he held a blood-drenched head. Chen and the other experts from the Great Thousand Worlds immediately gasped, their pupils narrowing in horror. That's Baizhu, they cried in shock. Chen's expression darkened. The person named Baizhu was a senior demon slayer from the palace of the Great Thousand, and he had chosen to enter the lair where the spear ancestor resided. He was one of the most powerful experts among those who entered that lair. But now, it was clear, he had been slain. So, that means the spear ancestor level has already been breached by the forces of the extraterritorial evil clan, and the shattered stone tablet signifies that the heavenly demon emperor's remnant soul in that lair has been released. Now, one remnant soul of the heavenly demon emperor has already escaped. If another one is freed, it's likely that the remnant soul could rival the will of the 4 ancestors. At that point, the sealing and suppression effect of the 4 sacred pagodas will weaken. Therefore, the remnant soul of the heavenly demon emperor must not be allowed to escape from this layer. Boom. Boom. As Chen's thoughts flashed, the stone tablet shattered, and the heavenly demon emperor's stone coffin, which had just been suppressed, suddenly trembled violently again. Despite the efforts of 3 stone tablets to restrain it, the coffin could not be calmed. Chen's heart skipped a beat as he watched this scene. The level of this clash was beyond his ability to intervene. He could only watch helplessly as the two forces battled it out. However, losing a stone tablet had clearly caused significant damage to the four sacred pagodas. As time passed, the demonic aura erupting from the stone coffin, which had absorbed the demon emperor's essence blood, grew more violent. Boom. At one point, the confrontation reached its peak. A 1,000-meter-tall blast of demonic light erupted from the stone coffin, and the entire coffin could no longer withstand the pressure. With a massive explosion, it shattered. The demonic light surged into the sky, accompanied by a howl that rang like thunder, echoing joyfully across the heavens and earth. Haha, I never expected that after thousands of years, my blood zombie heavenly demon emperor would see the light of day again. In the sky, the overwhelming demonic aura gathered to form a shadow roughly 100 feet tall. The figure had disheveled hair, its body covered in black fur, and an indescribable aura of terror swept across the land. Under the influence of such an aura, even Chen felt an irresistible sense of fear. Meanwhile, other powerful figures from the Great Thousand Worlds were so terrified that their legs gave way, nearly collapsing. Facing a heavenly demon emperor, even if it was only a remnant soul, was beyond their capability to handle. On the other hand, the strong members of the extraterritorial evil clan erupted in earth-shaking cheers. Hee, so it was you, kid, who released me? The blood zombie heavenly demon emperor's shadow looked down at Shi Tianyou, grinning wickedly. In that case, to show my gratitude, I think I'll borrow your body. Without waiting for Shi Tianyou's response, the remnant soul of the blood zombie heavenly demon emperor transformed into a streak of demonic light and descended, directly entering Shi Tianyou's head. At this moment, the emperor was only a remnant soul and needed a body to unleash his full power. As the remnant soul of the blood zombie heavenly demon emperor took over Shi Tianyou's body, Shi Tianyou's pupils gradually turned blood red, and his withered body began to take on the color of ancient cold iron, becoming incredibly strong. The blood zombie heavenly demon emperor stretched his body and grinned. So it's one of the corpse demon clan's little ones. Your body isn't bad. It seems I can use it to release a bit more of my power. He then turned his gaze toward the altar, murderous intent flashing in his eyes. Damn you, suppressing my remnant soul for all these years. Today, I'll show you how I'll destroy you. Boom. As he spoke, he slammed his palm forward, and the surging demonic aura transformed into a massive demonic seal. With unimaginable force, it hurtled toward the altar. Buzz. Just as the demonic seal was about to strike the altar, the central stone tablet suddenly radiated an ancient light. A frail, aged figure appeared within the light. With a wave of his sleeve, boundless light surged, like a streak of rainbow-colored clouds, resisting the demonic seal. Blood zombie, I never thought you'd escape, the ancient figure said as he floated in the air, sighing. The powerful figures of the Great Thousand Worlds were stunned upon seeing this figure, and Xian Luo, Moxin, Qing Shuang, and others cried out in surprise, Ancestor. The figure was none other than the one left behind by the floating pagoda Ancestor. Haha, floating pagoda old ghost, it seems your plan to suppress and annihilate us failed. Now, one of the four sacred pagodas has been broken. Once I deal with you, there will be a flaw in the pagoda, and our escape will be imminent. Shi Tianyou, now the blood zombie heavenly demon emperor, laughed. The floating pagoda Ancestors will shook his head, saying, I won't let you have your way. With just this will, do you think you can stop me? The blood zombie heavenly demon emperor sneered. This corpse demon clan brat's body is quite compatible with mine. This time, I've already won. The floating pagoda Ancestors will smiled lightly, saying, not necessarily. As the words left his mouth, his gaze swept across the surroundings. Swish. Swish. At that moment, Xian Luo and Moxin suddenly soared into the air, flying towards the altar. They loudly proclaimed, Ancestor, we, the juniors, are willing to assist you in slaying the demons. As they spoke, they immediately activated the floating pagoda within their bodies, which hovered above their heads, a radiant light and a dark hue, both emitting strange fluctuations. They rushed to appear because they knew that whoever helped the floating pagoda Ancestor slay the demons would certainly obtain the unparalleled divine ability of the eightfold pagoda. How shameless. Qing Ling, witnessing this scene, couldn't help but curse. Chen had worked tirelessly and fought hard to bring the situation to this point, but these two had chosen now to show up, hoping to reap the rewards. On the altar, the floating pagoda Ancestor looked at the floating pagodas above their heads with some surprise, then smiled in satisfaction. I never expected that after thousands of years, the younger generation of the Fudu clan would be so exceptional. Shen Luo and Mo Xian both rejoiced upon hearing this. However, before their expressions could fully show their joy, the floating pagoda ancestor turned his gaze towards Mu Chen's direction, saying, "But, if we are to slay the demon today, he is the best choice. Child, I saw your performance earlier. You were outstanding. Even in ancient times, members of my Fuda clan as remarkable as you were rare and precious," the floating pagoda ancestor said kindly to Mu Chen, his smile full of satisfaction. Mu Chen was taken aback and fell into a brief silence. The smiles on Shen Luo and Mo Xian's faces froze, and they quickly exclaimed, "Ancestor, this person is the sin child of our clan. He must not be chosen." The floating pagoda ancestor was stunned by their words. He scrutinized Mu Chen before frowning, and then addressed Shen Luo and Mo Xian, saying solemnly, "This child is resilient and patient. Even when facing the demon emperor's corpse, he did not flinch or retreat. His character is clearly not bad. How could he be a sin child?" Shen Luo and Mo Xian hesitated, stammering, "His mother had an affair with an outsider, causing the bloodline to be tainted. This is a great sin." However, they did not expect the floating pagoda ancestor to become furious at their words. He sharply reprimanded them, "Nonsense. To call such an outstanding member of the clan a sin child for this reason? How has the Futu clan become so absurd?" Shen Luo and Mo Xian exchanged glances, clearly shocked that the floating pagoda ancestor did not consider this a sin at all. After scolding them, the floating pagoda ancestor turned his gaze back to Mu Chen. His expression softened, and he asked gently, "Child, would you be willing to assist me in slaying the demons?" Mu Chen's expression was complex. It seemed this was the first time he had encountered a member of the Fuda clan who did not regard him as a sin child. He took a deep breath, and his voice rang out across the sky, causing Shen Luo and Mo Xian's faces to darken. "I, the junior, am willing to offer my full assistance."